Hi everyone. So my name is Andy O'Callaghan. As my the little information at the bottom left-hand corner of my screen says, I work for the union, your teaching union, the NASUWT. I manage the project where John works on in terms of delivering this really important information um, to you all today in terms of applying for your first teaching post and going through the interview process, which we've got another webinar on tomorrow. So I'm going to hand over to John very shortly, just to say finally, this is part of your package of support from the NAHWT, your union. We also provide free conferences and a whole range of support once you qualify from your teacher training, as long as you obviously remain a member with us. But John is going to give you some really, really important information tonight. John can speak for himself, but you are using the chat function for questions, which I'm going to summarize at the end, and John's going to deal with the questions at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, I'm going to switch my camera off so not to be a distraction and hand over to you, John.
Okay, thanks, Andy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through tonight the process of how schools initially filter applications and what to put in your application. Now, I presume you can see my screen. There we go. Okay. And tonight I'm going to talk about the application process, and tomorrow night I'm going to move on to talking about the interview. So the application process. Well, first of all, you need to know how and where to apply. So first steps, finding out about a vacancy. You're all on teacher training courses, so one of the best ways is word of mouth with your colleagues on your course, because you're all out on placement in different schools. And as you pick up that there's a job going in your school, or maybe the school down the road, if you've got something like a WhatsApp group, you can zap the word out to your colleagues. And if you hear about a job going in a school that you think might be suited to you, the first thing to do is do some checking up on the school, because what you want to do is make sure that it's the right fit for you. And all schools are different, and all of you are different. So what suits you might not suit the person who sits next to you in your next session at your training provider, and vice versa. So have a look at the school website and see if so far it looks of interest. And if it does, then the next step is to think about visiting the school. Now, if you're primary, this is essential unless there is a good reason why not. And that is because primary head teachers tend to think that if somebody doesn't come and visit, it's because they're not a serious applicant. And a good reason not to might be that you are training and living in Carlisle and the school's in Dover. That would be a valid reason not to go. But if it's a school 10 minutes down the road, then you should go. If you're secondary, take your lead from the tone of the school's ad, and whether they say something like visits to the school are warmly welcomed. Some departments can be keener than others on having people come in and have a look round. So it's not necessarily essential to visit, although it's still a good idea because it's a way of you picking up more information about whether the school is going to be right for you. So you go into the school if appropriate. As I say, if you're primary, definitely go in. And you're looking at, does it fit? Is it the right place for me? Does it look like the island in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen, or does it look like the other option on the opposite corner of the screen? And make sure you get it right. You can afford to try and get it right. don't rush headlong into the first job that you see, because there will be more jobs out there this year than there will be candidates for, certainly for primary and for most subjects in secondary. So you've decided that, yes, you want to go ahead and apply to the school. So these are the things that you need to think about in your application. First up, professional image. If you are still using the personal email address that you set up in year 8, and which sounded really funny in year 8, you may wish to create a new email address specifically for job applications. The best format for email address is either going to be one from your university or training provider, so ending .ac.uk, or it's something along the lines of first name dot last name number at gmail.com. And social media. Make sure that your security settings on social media are beefed up to the maximum, because we have to check up on you now. Yeah, it's in Kixi that we're supposed to do online checks of you. And you do not want your potential new head teacher finding those photographs of you lying drunk in a gutter in Ibiza. So social media settings, high security. No gaps in your career history. We are supposed to look for any gap of more than 3 months, and that's a safeguarding thing. And it doesn't matter what it is, it needs to be accounted for. Now, if you've just gone straight through school, university, PGC or whatever, that's fine. But if you've done 1 or 2 other things along the way, even if it's 6 months spent job hunting or 6 months traveling around Asia during a gap year or something like that, doesn't matter what it is. Could be a couple of years raising a family or something like that. Doesn't matter what it is, it just needs to be accounted for on the form somewhere. And there will be a space where you can put it in on the form, because we need to know that you're not concealing those 6 months that you spent in prison in Mexico on drugs charges. Referees, again, that's fairly straightforward for you, because your first referee is going to be from your training provider or your SCIT or your university. And it may be directly from your tutor. Check with your tutor. A lot of universities have a central reference providing pool. And the advantage of that is that even if the tutor's on holiday, you can still email. As an employer, I can still email the university and get the reference for you straight away. So your first reference is from your training provider. Your second reference is if you're primary, the head teacher of your current or most recent placement school. If it's secondary, then it would be what, in my neck of the woods, Bedfordshire, we would term the professional tutor. It's the person who's the lead on CPD across the school, who is normally going to be an SLT member. And that's who you put down, because even if the class teacher is the one who knows you, and ultimately, when the reference request comes in, whoever gets it is going to give it to the class teacher and say, fill that in for me. And then they just tweak it at the end. What's important is that it's the name of, as I say, the primary head or the secondary professional tutor that goes on the form, because that will carry a lot more weight when the school you're applying to receives it. Proofreading. You're applying to join a profession where we mark each other's work for a living. So your application needs to be perfect. No typos, no spag errors. And sometimes it can be difficult to spot your own mistakes because you know what you meant to say and the eye glazes over it. So what would be the best thing would be to get somebody else to have a look at it before you send it off, just to check for anything like that. Hobbies and interests. There'll be somewhere on the form where you can put this. Now, if your hobbies and interests are watching the latest Hollywood blockbusters, reading trashy novels, and going to gigs, that is probably not going to cut much mustard. So I wouldn't bother putting something like that in. But if you've got, for example, you play or coach any sports, if you've got any musical abilities, languages that you can link with travel, or things which are a little more off-piste. Maybe you're very much into gardening. Maybe you're a member of the local astronomy society. That's the kind of thing that might be worth putting in, because it may not make a difference. It's certainly not going to get you the job. But if at the end of the day, the school has got 2 candidates and one of them is you with an interest in astronomy, and unbeknownst to you, the head teacher for the last couple of years has been wanting to put on an after-school astronomy club, but he's got nobody who can do it, that's where it might come into play. But the crucial bit of the application form is the supporting statement. So let's have a look at that. Now, you may be asked for a separate statement or a covering letter. It may be embedded in the application form, or they may ask you to attach it as a separate document. If it's embedded in the application form, that's fine. If they ask it for it separately, they may ask for a covering letter or a supporting statement. The content, whichever of those it is exactly the same. The only difference is that a covering letter starts, "Dear head teacher's name," and finishes, "Yours sincerely." And a supporting statement is, "Supporting statement for so-and-so in my application to X school." And if you're using the same application that you sent a couple of weeks ago to a different school, do remember to go in and change the name of the school. And if it's embedded in the application form, then what I would suggest is that you check and see if there's any indication of a word count, because sometimes they have a word limit. Sometimes, if they're being particularly helpful, they may even tell you what the word limit is. Unlike the DFE, who a few years ago brought out an application form that they thought schools would be going to use. Actually, schools tended not to use it because it wasn't very helpful, didn't ask the things that schools wanted. But one of the things that the application form had was a supporting statement box with a word limit of 1,000 words. Unfortunately, they didn't tell you it had a word limit of 1,000 words, and there was actually no way of knowing. So I did come across a couple of people that typed happily in the box and wrote 1,500 odd words, clicked submit, and were completely unaware that the moment they clicked submit, the last 500 words disappeared off the form. So check to see if there is a word count. If not, 1,000 words is probably the right sort of ballpark to be aiming for anyway. And what I would be inclined to do is, even if it's embedded in the online form, I would do it in Word or something like that, a word processing program first, so that you can run a spell check and do a word count on it, and then cut and paste it into the actual form. Length, if they don't indicate otherwise, you're going for between 1.5 sides and 2 sides of A4. Format single space, font between 10 and 12. And what you're writing is against the person specification. The person specification is the document in the application pack that lists the essential and desirable criteria for the job. And the desirables are exactly what they say, they're desirable. If you've got them, good. But if you haven't, it's not necessarily a deal breaker. But the ones that you need to write against are the essential criteria. And the reason for that is that when we're shortlisting, we shortlist on a scale of 0 to 3, where 3 is above expected, 2 is meeting the criterion, 1 is working towards, and 0 is didn't mention it. And if somebody scores 0 on any one criterion from the person spec, that application automatically scores 0 overall. So make sure that you address every item listed as essential in the criteria. And a way of doing that, there's no reason why you shouldn't actually take each criterion and use them as a paragraph header. And that way you can make sure that you've covered each point. And it's obvious to the reader that you have as well. And the first paragraph of your supporting statement is always going to be why this school. And there we come back to the visit. Because as you're visiting the school and being shown round, they will have been showing you things that they are particularly proud of. Now, it might be something to do with the facilities, it might be the sports fields, might be the IT infrastructure, or it might be something like exam results. But there'll be something, and that's what you're looking for when you visit. So that's the second part of visiting the school. One is it right for me? And 2, what are they particularly proud of? What do they think they do well? Because head teachers love to be stroked and flattered. And this is where you do your stroking and flattering. In the paragraph of why this school, I would like to apply to work at this school because when I visited, I was particularly impressed by, and then you tell them whatever it is that they think they do well. And if you don't have a person spec, the areas to cover are philosophy of education, skills, knowledge, and experience relevant to the post. So if you're primary and it's a year 3 job, what classroom experience have you had in lower key stage 2? If you're secondary, you want to talk about your subject knowledge. And that's particularly important in things like science, where you might be, let's say your degree is chemistry, but you'll probably find yourself teaching a bit of key stage 3 physics and maybe also biology. So talk about your the balance of your knowledge of the overall science curriculum. And that goes to for all other subjects as well. That's how you approach it. And finally, other skills, knowledge, and experience. And this is where you put in your sports coaching and your astronomy. But remember that the role of the application form is purely to secure the interview. Once you've sent your application off and you get the phone call or the email back from the school saying, we would like to invite you for interview, at that point, the application form has done its job and you now have a blank sheet of paper alongside all the other candidates, and it's down to performance on the day. So we'll come to the actual interview process tomorrow night, but just a couple of things that are going to be the first points that I'd be making tomorrow night, but it saves me a few seconds now. Preparation for the interview. You are going to be expected to bring documents with you. They'll tell you what they want to see, but as a minimum, there'll be proof of ID, so passport or driving license, and they will probably want to see some sort of proof of studies, and they may want to see things like proof of address that you would use for a DBS check. So nip down to a stationer's like Smith's or Ryman's and get hold of one of those document wallets that's got the clear plastic pouches that you can drop documents into, and prepare so that when you get there on the day and they say, can we have a look at your documents, you can just hand them over. Job done. And the other thing is make sure that you know exactly where the school is, because Google sat nav is not always to be entirely relied on. As a local authority school improvement advisor, I've spent many happy hours driving round and round a school site because the entrance is on the opposite side of the school to the road that the sat nav thinks it's on. So if you haven't done a visit to the school beforehand anyway, it's worth doing a dry run, say the Sunday before, and work out exactly where the school is so you know where you're going. And also, in case the school car park is full, which can be a particular issue with primary schools, you've identified that little residential street a couple of minutes away where you can park the car. So that's the application process. The interview's tomorrow night, but for now, let's see if we've got any questions. So Andy should be back.
Hi, John. Now, we've only got a couple of questions actually tonight, John. So, first of all, thank you for your presentation. The main one is who would you recommend as a second referee if you're applying for a job at your placement school? And that is from Greg.
If you're applying in your own placement school, I think I would wander down the corridor and have a chat with head teacher if it's primary, professional tutor if it's secondary, and ask them for their advice on who you should put as a referee, or ask your mentor.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Charlotte just wants to say that was absolutely brilliant. So, thank you, Charlotte. Um, Someone's asked, Arzu's asked for a link for tomorrow's meeting. We can get those out, Arzu. And we'll send another reminder out to people tomorrow morning about the link for tomorrow's um, webinar. Is there anything we should avoid repeating between our personal statements and the application? So it's a very similar question to before.
If the supporting statement is embedded in the form, then that's all you need to say. And if they ask for a covering letter as well, the covering letter is simply it's the email saying, please find attached my application.
And again, it's a kind of a linked question really from Millicent. Can you say a little bit more about the statement on the philosophy of education?
I think what I would put in that is probably one that you want to take back and talk to your tutors at your training provider about what they suggest, because what that could be is what you could work in there is things like any research projects that you're doing as part of your training. But it's also the concepts that you take into account when you're planning how you're going to educate your class. So looking at things like the whole child. But I would say take that one back to your tutors.
Thanks, John. I think we only have one more, which is from Rhiannon, who's asked practical question really more than anything else. What sort of documents what would count as proof of address? So she's moving house at the end of June, right before her ECT transition month, so may struggle to find bills, etc.
I think I would take what you've got at the moment, but explain that when you go in on the interview day, or particularly if they offer you the job, because they can then get you to bring in new documents when you start in September, so they can do the DBS check then, or they may say bring them in at the end of July. But if they're aware, they can then work out how they want to play that.
Now, I can only see one more, John, from Rebecca. So, when talking about experience, do we refer back to our various placements and what we have done there?
If it's relevant, yes.
Simple answer.
Yeah. I think
Um,
as I think it was Greg's point came up about applying in your placement school. There is one other question that has come up. I've been doing this talk around various universities, and Somebody said, what happens if you're in your placement school has a job going, but you're not sure that you want to apply for it, and they seem to be putting pressure on you? Um, and just in case that scenario came up, my answer to that would be, um, say I'm not, I don't feel ready to make my mind up yet. And if necessary, you could maybe invent a partner who might be moving to another part of the country or something. And so you can't commit until you know what their plans are. But be creative, be prepared to duck. Don't let yourself be pressured into working in a school that might not be right for you.
We have got another question that's come up, and I'm really sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I've got Ogumilwone. I'm really, really sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but it's related to the teaching standards. Do we use the teaching standards during the application process? Do you refer to the teaching standards during the application process? I read that as.
Um, if they're listed in the essential criteria of the person spec, and the chances are that several of them will be, then yes, you address them there. So the person spec will probably have something about behavior management. It will have something about teaching and learning. It will have something about inclusion. So yes, you can refer back to the teacher standards there. But only in response to the phrasing of the person spec.
This looks. We've got another. My name is Murphy. Sorry, Murphy. I think so. Can we? But Murphy's asked a subsidiary question. Can we use, as international students, can we use home experience from their native country?
Again, I would say yes if it's relevant. So, um, for example, if you were primary and you're talking about a year group, yeah, this is the experience I've had in the UK, but I also taught this year group for X number of years in my own country. So yes, you can work that in.
So the only other question I can see, and again, kind of covered this to an extent, but from an anonymous attendee, are we required to have a personal statement as well as a supporting statement?
No, it's the same thing.
Same thing. So that is all the questions I can see, Sean,
There's
and we
another
are
one just come
hitting.
in.
Oh, there's another one just come in.
Yeah. Uh, right. Document showing right to work in the UK.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, typically that would be in the passport. Because it would be if you've got a visa, it would probably be in there. But if not, you'll have some sort of documentation from the Home Office, I assume. But ask the school what they would like you to see. Their HR administrator will be able to say what they want.
And I think we've just hit 6:30, and I can't see any more questions coming up at the moment. So we are due to finish. So can I just say, on behalf of us at the union, the NASUWT, but obviously all the people who've come here today, thank you very much, John. That was absolutely brilliant. I'm sure you'll all agree. Thank you also to all of you as NASUWT members for giving up some of your evening to join us this evening as well. We really do appreciate that. And I hope you all come tomorrow, when John will talk about the interview process, which is really, really important stuff as well. So hopefully you'll all come tomorrow, and we'll send a reminder out in the day with the link in again. So thank you all. One other thing has just come in. I know, I think we have dealt with everything. Thank you to thank you, yeah. So thank you all, and thank you to John, and have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you.